Okay, well, hey, good turnout. Thank you all for coming. Very first question, I think maybe I know people are always asking this, why did you choose to go to Mongolia? And so I've tried to prepare this a little ahead of time and see how that works. Mongolia is not really one of the top birding countries in the world, although it certainly has lots of unique birds. But there's just something about that country. I've never been to that part of the world. That kind of enthralled me. Something I just like some things a little bit different. It's quite different from any other kind of a birding tour I ever went on, and that's one of the other things that probably entered my mind. Actually, and then when I was over there was another thought came to mind. I did a lot of genealogy when I first retired, and of course, like lots of people are doing now, they get their DNA done and profiled, and amazingly enough, about 1% of my DNA makeup is Central or Western Asian. And after you see some of the maps that I'm going to show you here of the Mongolian Empire back in the 12 and 1300s, you realize that maybe there's some draw there because of that genealogy and that DNA connection that drew me there. So for those who like to think in that way, you're welcome. So anyway. One of the things when I signed up for this trip is led by a company called Wings, which has been around for a long time. It's one of the better known birding tour companies in the country. And I had never been with them before, but they just happened to have kind of the setup that I wanted for this particular trip, certain things that I was looking for. And of all the things to begin with, when I was talking to some of the people who put this tour together, one of the things I wanted to do was see this right here. And it's not too far, it's about 30 miles east of the capital of Mongolia, which is Ulaanbaatar. If you look up there, those are people standing right there. So that gives you an idea of the size of this. This is the largest equestrian statue in the world. And size-wise, as I recall, when I looked that up, it's about 40 meters. And I'm not sure if that 40 meters is from the hooves on up to the top or from the bottom, but it's a pretty impressive piece of work for sure. This is just one aspect of what the people in Mongolia are going to do. There's another project that they have coming that's right near here, where they're going to put, I think it's something like 1,000 small statues of some of their warriors in kind of one group, kind of like maybe the terracotta warriors in China. I don't know if that's where they got the idea from or not, but so there's more to come. And just all around you when you're in Mongolia, you know that this is a gentleman that they still rever after, whatever, 12 or 1,300 years. So anyway, okay, here we go. Make sure I know what buttons to push here. Let me just do that. Does that work? Okay, here we go. Just wanted to do a little prep on the history in particular, but maybe also the culture before we went. And this is really an amazing piece of work here. It was actually a New York Times bestseller. And it goes in a lot of detail about the history of, let me first say that this name right now, they now use the name Chinggis Khan, not Genghis Khan, which we all, I guess, or at least I was used to saying. So anyway, and on some of the other aspects that you see in other places, it'll be spelled Chinggis, Khan, and the Khan, and the K is silent. So Chinggis Khan is how that's pronounced now, apparently. So anyway, this was certainly a good So, oh, okay. So anyway, yeah, this will just give you an idea of the size of this statue. And it was the very first day there that we left town, and it was pretty amazing. It's pretty enjoyable. A little bit more history, going way back. This gives you an idea of the extent of the Mongolian Empire, at least the largest extent of it, back to about 1279. And actually, Genghis Khan started this whole expansion in about the year roughly 1224. And so that was in a period of 50 years, believe it or not, back then, with horses that they essentially conquered or at least had an influence on that large of an area. So pretty, pretty spectacular. All of Moscow. At that point in time, or a little bit later, Beijing, the Mongolians basically started the city of Beijing during the late 1200s. So pretty interesting history. A little better idea of where it's situated. Again, the capital, Ulaanbaatar. Russia to the north, China to the south. So it's basically totally landlocked between Russia and China. Real close here to Kazakhstan, but pretty isolated country. This is Lake Baikal, that some of you may be familiar with. It's the deepest lake in the world and probably the largest, at least in terms of volume of water in the world. Like I read something about that maybe 20% of the fresh water in lakes in the world is right there. The only lake in the world, I think, that has freshwater seals in it. So it's certainly interesting country around there. Statistics, I won't give you a lot of these, but I think some of them are interesting. Size is a little over 4 times the size of Montana. Population, 3.5 million. Distance from Montana, if you're flying directly from Helena and flying west, or at least a line on Google Earth, is about 5,500 miles. If you go east, it's only a little bit farther than that. It was like 5,800 miles, I think, if you fly east to get there directly. Capital, Ulaanbaatar, coldest capital in the world, and I'll show you a little bit later kind of some comparisons. With, like for instance, Montana. Montana lies at just about the same latitude that Mongolia does. And so in lots of ways, and you'll see vegetatively, there's a fair number of comparisons there, vegetatively and vegetation zones and so forth. So it's pretty interesting. Language, Mongolian, of course. The Russians were kind of basically in charge of Mongolia from about 1924, when the Russians essentially took over and Mongolia became kind of a satellite nation of Russia, until 1989, when they basically kicked the Russians out and they adopted a constitution in 1992. And so they are now a constitutional democracy. Religion, Buddhism, shamanism, apparently some Christianity there. Economy, upper middle class is what they classify it as, which is, I thought was kind of interesting for a kind of what you would think would maybe be a third world nation, but it's really economically, it's higher, has a higher status than that. Landscape, and I'll show you a little bit more of that on a map here shortly, but high mountains on the north part of the north tier. In the center, they call it a steppe, kind of a vegetation zone. And to the south is the Gobi. And you just call it the Gobi. I learned, I guess, that Gobi means desert. And so you shouldn't use the term, or it's not appropriate to use the term Gobi desert. So just mark that down in your book. Okay, getting there. All right, here we go. This may seem kind of odd to some of you, the way the travel that we did to get to Mongolia. And one of the reasons we did this is because I had this affliction, this obsession, compulsion kind of a thing that kind of guides my life sometimes. And you know, about, I guess it was the 1st of January 2019, I started doing some bird lists, an e-bird checklist down in Arizona, and every day I was there, I did one. And, you know, when I came home, I decided, well, gee whiz, I did about 60 or 70 days in a row of those, and maybe it'd be kind of neat to continue that. And so I have continued that, and I've continued that to the point until about a week or so ago, I'm at, 2,500 consecutive days of e-bird checklist every day. And so even my wife now reminds me, have you done your checklist today? And it's worked. And one of the problems is it's potentially contagious. And I have a friend sitting in the audience here, and I need to apologize to his wife because this is Stephen Turner also is starting to do this now and has been doing it for a while. And I'm sorry, Stephen. So, okay, so anyway, the way we started out, and the reason to keep my list going, if you fly across the Pacific, it's a long flight to begin with, but you cross the international date line when you go across there. And so it's very difficult to get a flight where you are landing somewhere, at least at an airport, where you can count some pigeons or something like that to put on a checklist. And so the way to get around that is to fly east out of Montana, and then you don't have that problem. And you know, it worked great. And then with my travel agent, my daughter Melissa here, she figured out some really neat ways to get that, to go east there too. And I'll get, well, here they are right here. One of them is, we flew to, our first major stop was in Helsinki, Finland. And I mean, if you're flying that way, you might as well take advantage of it. So we stayed about a day and a half in Helsinki. Very nice town, newish type town for Europe. But very nice town. If you read some of the statistics, Finland and the people in Finland are considered the happiest in the world, I think. And we did, you know, we spent some time around there. You can see this big crowd here around one of the main squares. We stayed in a hotel overlooking this part of the port right there, and we did about a half a day of birding there. And they have some good birding there, and so I picked up about 50 birds for a bird list in Finland, where I had never been before. After Finland, you know, it's only a couple of hours by ferry across the Baltic Sea to get to Estonia. And so why not, you know, it's that close, why not pick up Estonia? And so we did that also. And Tallinn, Estonia is a really charming town. I mean, if you ever get over that way, it is a really neat town and some of the other towns in Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia are pretty neat countries. And of course, you know, while you're there, you want to do some birding too. So we hired a guide, and I got my birds for the day. I might point out that this bird, a field fair on a Christmas bird count it was 12 or 15 years ago in Missoula. One of these was found in Missoula, which I thought was sort of interesting. Yeah. So anyway, okay, from here on, we went through, connected through Istanbul, and from Istanbul over to Ulaanbaatar was about an 8-hour flight, so it's a pretty long flight even from down there to get to Mongolia. I wanted to put this in because I said before that it's the coldest capital in the world. But last year, looking at forecasts, the average temperature in Ulaanbaatar right now is 16 high and -9 low for low. Compare that to Helena right now, and our normal high is 44. normal low is 24. So you can see they're a tad bit cooler than we are here. Okay, one of the neat things about eBird, one of the many neat things, it's a really fantastic piece of technology that Cornell University has put together. But every time you stop and do an eBird checklist, there's a GPS unit attached to your phone, and it'll put a dot on the map exactly where you are. And so if you want to have a fairly good track on your locations, if you got like a 7-day, or in this case about a 16 or 17-day trip, right there it is. That's pretty neat. This is a Google map here, and gives you a little better idea what the north is like. A lot of conifer up here, and what was interesting to me is, and I'll show you some pictures of that in a minute, but a lot of that conifer, most of it seems to be a pure larch tree. And so, and larch, of course, is the conifer tree that drops its needles in the winter. So must be sort of an interesting comparison. And so we started out up there. Distances are pretty long, and just to give you an idea, the last time, the second day or third day we were up here, we started from about right in there, and we went from right there down to this town called Galazangad, and that was a 350-mile trip. It was a lot of driving. It was on a paved road at that point in time, but a paved road that, well, they aren't pretty too good with potholes on some of their roads there, so we had to dodge a few of those. But anyway, that gives you an idea. And I forgot to get a figure on how many miles we may have covered in this whole route here, but with that being 350 and with all the little side routes we took and everything, I'm guessing we went maybe 2,000, 2,500 miles or something like that was the distance that we covered on this trip. Here's a look at our tour group, or at least parts of our tour group. This is our guide is right here. His name is Stephen Menzie. He's British, although he lives in Sweden now. Has lived in Sweden, the head of a bird observatory there in Sweden. Real good guy. This was a real, oh my goodness, this was such a benefit in this trip, but we were so lucky with this. This is a fellow by the name of Steve Howell. And Steve Howell has been a bird guide for this Wings company for about 40 plus years. He was actually born and raised in Wales, but came over to the States and to Mexico right after he finished college, I guess. And he's now considered one of the, if not the world authority on seabirds. He has spent something like, I think the figure was like 4 years basically on ships looking at seabirds during his lifetime. Has written like 15 books. Like this one that we're giving away. Plus the one that we're talking about right there, along with another gentleman who's fantastic from eBird group in Cornell. So we were really lucky with that. Everybody else except this one gentleman right here were all Americans, from kind of scattered around from Seattle area, San Francisco, Texas, and so forth. And I'll talk about him in a second here. The vehicles that we had, we drove in these four-wheel drive Toyota Land Cruisers. We had 4 of them that we used. It was amazing all the stuff they could get in those for this particular trip. Comfortable, really good outfits. Anyway, this gentleman here is from Great Britain, and he had a stroke about, I don't know, three years ago or something like that, I think, and does not get around too well. And so what the company did was bring an extra person along so that when we were in at least fairly flat countryside, they would have another guy who kind of have him hang on, so we didn't have some sort of an accident with him. That's really quite a special thing to do for somebody. And he was just an excellent birder, very, very knowledgeable. Both Melissa and I were very, very impressed with him, and a very nice fellow to begin with. So, all right, wow, look at that. That's a start. I'm not a big person who goes after lots of target birds, but I did have 3 or 4 different species that I really wanted on this trip. And this is the very first day out with one of the top 3 or 4 birds that I wanted to see. And we had stopped in a kind of a large forest, and we're getting ready to have lunch. And again, Steve Howell, as was usual, he wasn't around with everybody else. He was out looking for birds. And what did he find? About 50 or less than 50 yards away from where we were setting up for lunch was this black-billed capercaillie. And this is a male. You can tell it's a pretty good-sized bird. It's not maybe quite as big as a turkey, but it's bigger than any of our grouse. Maybe a little bigger than a big sage grouse male. So anyway, what a great start. And it's a bird that was really, it's always tough. They don't always see this bird on these trips. Capercaillies are common, or relatively common in Northern Europe, the whole way over to Scotland, Northern Europe and Asia over to Scotland. This is a different species of them, though, and so that's why, I've seen them in Scotland, so, it was no big thing finding another one, but this was a new species, and that was kind of a great start. This will give you an idea of what breakfast is like, and with those vehicles that we had, plus all of our luggage and lots of other things, all stuffed in the back of those Toyotas, and pretty good eating, for sure. So, and again, you can see these are all larch trees right here. And actually, this is, you can see the date right here, May 28th. It doesn't look like they're fully leaved out yet, but that's because this is cold country, so that's part of it. Okay, here's some of the birds that you might expect in a large forest. Again, this is similar to what you find in Montana in our conifer forest here too. Eurasian nuthatch is like our either red-breasted or white-breasted nuthatch. Willow tit is, looks very much like our black-capped chickadee. Darien redstart, at least somewhat looks like our redstart that you find in moisture areas in Montana. So, good start.
There we go.
Here's our first night. Most of the trip we stayed in what they call, I guess we would call yurts, but they call them gears. It's spelled G-E-R, but they're called gear camps. And this is just a pretty plush one, very, very nice. This is what it looks like inside. It was still cold. Our mornings up there were maybe the mid-20s, the first 2 mornings there. We found out after the first morning that if you request it, at 6 a.m. they'll come and start a fire there for you in the morning. So that's something we did take advantage of. So this is our carriage that they took our luggage from the vehicles over to our yurts on this yak carriage there. Interesting. This is kind of looking north out of where we were staying there. And, you could be looking at parts of Montana here. Again, large forest. This is probably willow, maybe some cottonwood or birch down in here, and that's probably mostly that large forest. Pretty nice big riparian area there. This little kind of a rock cairn here, we saw a number of when you travel. Sometimes when we were going over kind of a high point, a pass or something like that, and we stopped near one of these things. It has some religious significance, and I'm not sure exactly what it is. And I think maybe they call them, Melissa was telling me she thought they called them, or she spelled it O-V-O-O, and I looked it up and it was O-B-O-O. But anyway, and then some of the some of the drivers and so forth, and maybe some of the other Mongolians would kind of walk around there 3 times and throw rocks up on there. So but I assume that's related to their shamanism. Whoops, did that just go out? Related to their shamanism? Did that go? Okay, well. Is this still on?
No, but I'll fix it for you.
Okay. Not sure what happened. Actually, I speak fairly loudly. Can you see? Okay, got it. Okay, okay, we'll try it from here. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, anyway, that gives you a little bit of an idea of some of the cultural aspects there, as well as the scenic. More cultural, lifestyle. Most of Mongolia is grazing country. There's very little or plowed farming going on there. And what you see scattered across the countryside are these kind of little yurt camps that are stations where and these are nomadic. So the people, they move around quite a bit, and it's my understanding they don't even winter in these places. I think some of them go into town. They must bring their livestock with them, I guess, into town. But anyway, it's basically their way of life. And one of the most interesting things is you will not see any sign of a barbed wire fence anywhere. In the 2,500 miles that we went, the only place we saw barbed wire was kind of close to the main town, where they were doing a little bit of plowing agriculture, small grain stuff that looked like. That's the only place we ever saw barbed wire. And exactly how these people know where to graze in relationship with the other grazers around there, I can't tell you. But it seems to work. They've been doing it for generations, and it basically is what we would call a rest rotation grazing system, where they move the cattle or the sheep or camels or horses or whatever they be. They move them around on a consistent basis, so you aren't hammering the same place all the time. And in fact, we have sent Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks have sent people over there years ago just to kind of study how they do that. And a lot of ranchers, and I think probably the Montana ranching program that Leslie was talking about, probably with these ranches that they put in that, are mostly all doing this kind of a grazing system now, which is certainly better on the landscape than vegetation. So, okay, you'll start to get a few more birds here. The steppe eagle on the left here is probably the most common eagle that we saw. We saw maybe 4 or 5 different eagle species. Golden eagles, though, we saw a fair number of those. And golden eagles are the species that they seem to hold in more reverence, I think, there than any other. I mean, that was the really important large raptor for them. I know you hear about falcons in some of these areas. I'm not sure how falcons fit into these communities here like they do, for instance, over in the Iraq and Iran and some of those other areas. But I know golden eagles here were quite the important bird. Black storks, of course, Eastern Europe or other parts of Europe, you see the more white storks. A northern lapwing, kind of a plover type bird, like our killdeer. Common cuckoos, you heard them a lot more frequently than you saw them. It's I don't know if you've been around those and heard them, but just like the clock, it's cuckoo, cuckoo. A little finer than that. We had probably 4 or 5 different species of vultures. If you can call vultures handsome, this is maybe one of the handsomer ones, I thought. We'll leave it at that. To each his own. One of our next stops, actually, we had a little bit of a benefit at one of our next stops, and instead of staying in one of these gears, we actually had a little cabin to stay in, a cabin that actually had its own shower. And on the, whatever we were out there, 16 or 17 or 18 days, that's the only time we had our own private shower. So, yeah. Yeah, anyway. I'll leave that one alone. Pretty nice eating facilities. The food was probably not a lot different, I guess. I don't know if Melissa has any thoughts on that. I mean, a lot of what we had meat-wise probably was mutton, I'm guessing. But you know, a lot of vegetables and some, you know, rice dishes and that sort of thing. For those few that may be interested in the little toddy before dinner, they had a limit of one for each of us, which is probably good. The rivers are gorgeous, and again, one of the big draws over there for all of, you know, for tourism is fishing. And what was really interesting for me is the head guide that we had did more guiding of fishermen than he did of birders and other kinds of people. And he has actually been to Bozeman, and I think been to Bozeman several times, and of course, being one of the, maybe the Montana fishing capital of Montana is Bozeman. And so he was quite familiar with some areas here, and had fished some of the same rivers that I have over the years. Pretty interesting. The fish that really attracts people there is this taimen. And this, I think I have heard, is supposedly the largest salmonid fish in the salmon and trout family in the world. And that's what, at least one of the species that these people seem to go for here. So this Tool River is a really long one that, and we saw this up north, but anyway, it goes the whole way around the south side of Ulaanbaatar, the capital, and it's quite a long river. It's a long history, I guess, also. But again, pretty nice looking stuff. Getting into a few different species here. Siberian house martin, of course, similar to our swallows. Oriental plover was a gorgeous bird. Unfortunately, that's the only one of these that we saw. We did see a lot of different pipit species, lice pipit, and you know, some of our pipits do these really fancy displays. They fly up in the air and then kind of drift down, and these do the same thing. So it's maybe pipit means something like that. I don't know. Okay, heading south on that long 350-mile drive that I talked about earlier. And we start to see some different things, even some different livestock. And I can't tell you, I assume that these are domestic, but I don't know that for sure. We didn't see herders around those too frequently. And if anybody here has a problem remembering how you tell a back-trained camel from a dromedary camel, okay, you know what you do? You take the first letter, like back train, turn it on its side, and it has two humps. The D does. Dromedary, just the same. It's a D. So you can tell your grandkids that sometime. Yeah, now we're down in the Gobi area, which again is the southern tier for the most part. And the southern tier and the border between southern Mongolia and China is basically some mountain ranges and a lot of pretty deep canyons and really kind of different country, and you know, pretty good birding down there too. At this particular canyon that we were going to go down, I assume these are mostly natives, but I'm not sure. There may have been some tourists here too, because they draw tourists over in Mongolia just for the horse riding. So, but anyway, we didn't ride. We walked down there, which is usually better for birding. This gives you a little idea of what that looks like over here. Again, that's Steve on his own looking for birds and doing a bang-up job of finding them for us. Okay. Let's go. Okay, what's going on now? There we go. Okay, here's a couple of the more common birds that we saw. This white-winged snowfinch, when it flies, it's kind of like our snow bunting here. There's a lot of white in the wings, and they were quite common here. Saw lots of those. The warblers, the old world warblers, and I'll be showing you some more pictures of those, aren't anywhere nearly as colorful as our warblers are. And some of them, they get into certain groups, and they're pretty difficult to really tell apart. And I'll show you some of those here in a little bit. Chinese beautiful rose finch. Some of the finches are a little more colorful than ours. I'm not sure what's going on with this now. Okay. Okay, another bird that I really kind of wanted to see while it's widespread over steep rocky canyon areas throughout Europe, even over, I think, as far as Spain, is this wall creeper. And we were in the perfect habitat for that here, and just looked and looked and looked, and just as we were about to exit the canyon on this particular day, again, Steve Howell looked up there, and there were two of them he spotted and showed them to us. And these things, if you catch a good view of them flying with that red, white, and black, and the feathers, were just really, really a stunning bird.
How big are they?
Probably a robin size. I'm guessing, maybe a little bigger. Yeah. Some other critters, and of course, the one on the left here, we have those. I think they had like 3 or 4 different species of pikas in Mongolia. This one I did some research on. I'm pretty sure this is a Pallas pika. And that little viper right there, that Haley's pit viper, that picture is a little misleading because that snake is only about 4 inches long. And somebody had put some rocks around it so it didn't get stepped on by the horses or whatever. But it makes a good picture. And we saw some probably different species of these agamis also, kind of a pretty neat critters. Up in these high rocky ridges around the canyons, ibex were really quite common. And I wouldn't venture to see how many we saw, probably in the dozens, but one of the things that comes to mind, and this isn't the best area for it, but another one of the things that draws a lot of people to Mongolia are snow leopards. I mean, there are people who are bird listers, but anyway, this world is now coming to the point where we have a lot of people are building mammal lists and bug lists and everything else. And this apparently Mongolia must be one of the better places to find snow leopards. In fact, some of the companies that run these birding tours over there reserve about maybe 3 days of their birding efforts just to look for snow leopards. And they get some of the locals around there who know the habits and maybe know where some of these leopards hang out. And those are the ones that the guides pick to key out and to find them for them. And it's apparently quite a show. Ground squirrels, kind of like maybe our Richardson or Columbia ground squirrels here. Okay, now we're kind of going to leave a little bit of that canyon stuff. We'll have more canyons, but they aren't the big long ones like we had, like the ones we just went down through there. And so on the top left here, that's the last time we were going to see at about noon on June 2nd. That's for about the next 8 or 9 days. That's the last hard-covered roadside we were going to see. From there on, we were on 2-track roads. And that was really pretty interesting. We'll see a little bit more of that here in a bit. But, and then on the right-hand side, that's I know this is desert, but the desert isn't all sand down there. This is probably 2, 3, 4 inch a year rainfall here, and you do get some vegetation. So that gives you some sort of an idea of some of what we were going through at that time. And some of the birds that we saw in this desert type country, really neat, one called a Mongolian ground jay. And we saw that in a couple of places here, and then another one. They like to hang around some places where you get a little bit of a shrub kind of a component of the vegetation, and that's what they seem to like. And then this other Saxall sparrow, that's got to be one of the handsomer sparrows that maybe in the world. It's got some nice color, and it was a nice bird. Another warbler that sure doesn't look like one of our warblers, but that's what they call a desert warbler. Gray-necked bunting, kind of a nice bird. And then a real prize that was not on my docket at all, not on my mind at all. Again, Stephen was out here. Stephen was out wandering around while the rest of us were eating lunch, and he walked up a little bit farther away from us in this canyon, and here's this Eurasian eagle owl up there. That is the largest, heaviest owl in the world. And what was interesting, that bird would kind of pop his head every now and then out of here, so you had to be really careful and lucky with your camera. Just when he popped his head out to take a picture, I probably took, 60 or 70 pictures and finally got a decent one here. And then we also saw the other mate of this owl, and it's just huge. It flew, it was actually calling and did some flying, and we saw it fly, but we couldn't see where it sat down finally. But that's, and Gary, the British guy that had the stroke, he was just beside himself, because this was one of his favorite birds. This was the bird he wanted. And here it was, and he was hooting and hollering, and whatever. So, it's fun to watch somebody with that kind of response. Okay, one of the small canyons, I guess not too far from where you just saw the owl, we were coming out of this canyon, and so we had dark on either side of us here, kind of a dark black wall there. And then out in front of us was this big string of sand dunes. And it's one of the more unique scenic views that I've ever had in anything. And that really struck me. And we tried to talk the drivers into stopping so we could take a picture with that back, with that side, the side looking like that, and they wouldn't stop. So this is what we got here. But anyway, it's still interesting. And these sand dunes are pretty amazing. If you look on Google Earth and you kind of hone in on these things, I think this row of sand dunes here is probably 100 miles long. Just 500-600 feet high, and so you wonder how you're even going to get through there, because the place we were going to stay was on the other side of that for the night. And so you're looking, and then finally they found this little hole, I guess, or a little path you could go through. If you look on the right, that's not a place you want to take any two-wheel drive car, where you're not going to get through there. But we made it through, and no problems.
Oh my God.
And that's just the morning and evening sunlight, the shadows and so forth that they put forth on these dunes are just fantastic. And then the bottoms, at least in this particular place where we were, there is a little bit of a stream going through there. And so pretty nice vegetation. The blue flowers that you see, and I had a little picture of a box of some there, those were all iris that seem to be very, very similar to the wild iris that we have here in Montana. You can go up here to the McDonald Pass up here and see some of that growing in some of those places. So, pretty nice. The most abundant bird in these desert areas down here were a Pallas sand grouse. And these are not really grouse. These are members of the dove pigeon family. And we saw them by the dozens, maybe even the hundreds at times. And one of their unique features of them is this time of year, you see these big flocks of them in the morning and the evening. And what they're doing is they're going to water supply areas, ponds or little streams or something, drinking up a bunch of water and I guess storing it in their crop or somewhere, and then flying back and taking that to the young in the nests. So it's a really kind of a unique way to adapt to a desert environment where you do have some water available.
Those pigeon size, or?
Probably bigger than pigeons. Yeah, bigger than pigeons, I think, by a little bit. Yeah, because the one on the ground, I'd say maybe they're the size of a Hungarian partridge or a gray partridge, something like that. So yeah.
So they're obviously ground nesters?
Yeah, yep, yep. Well, there's no, now we haven't seen the trees in about 5 days, and we aren't going to see any trees. We're going to see some shrubs along some of the lakes, but you know, the trees are a thing for another 8 or 10 days until we run into some trees again. So maybe, I guess, I'm not sure if it was every day, maybe closer to every other day, maybe we'd run into a small community out there. And, you know, I don't know how many people, maybe 500, maybe 1,000 people at the most. And every one of them had a real nice school. Apparently they have a very good education system in the country now. And typical gas station out there. And then at some of these long drives we had, I guess boredom sets in and maybe we need a little bit of exercising. And I did not do well in this balancing challenge. Yeah, anyway, fun, good, really good group, really good group. Oops. Okay, now we're starting a part of the trip that actually me and my age was wondering a little bit about, and that's tent camping for the next 6 nights. I mean, I'm not used to sleeping on the ground in tents anymore. I don't sleep too well, but you know, as it turned out, it was pretty good. And of course, the best part of it was we joined up with 2 other crews, and one of them was the tent and facilities crew that put up the tents for us with cots and everything else, and then there was also a cook crew. And so we had these are 2-person tents right here, and then 1-person tents. The drivers and all the others stayed over here, and there's also a tent for eating lunch or dinner or both in. And then this is the outhouse, and they just dug a hole every place we had needed an outhouse, and then just moved on and afterwards. Pretty good look, or pretty typical of what some of our meals, and again, that's probably mutton, and it looks like asparagus, and I'm not sure what this is, but obviously we ate it. Okay, some of the birds. Next morning, I just took a walk up into a kind of a rocky, washed out canyon. And it had some more birds, another kind of a warbler that's certainly not colorful. Interesting bird here. Does that look familiar to any of you? That's the same species as we have, just a little bit different variety, a little bit different coloration. We'll have out here in the valley, and then in winters we'll have these by the many hundreds. Wheat ears. This is a pied wheat ear. We have about 4 different kinds of species of wheat ears. And I'll show you another one here in a little bit. Ruddy shell duck. And I don't know if you've ever noticed, but some of our Canada geese around here nest up on these high cliffs down along the river. And that's what we were seeing with some of these shell ducks up here too. I'm not sure where the closest water was to them here, but it was pretty common to see those shell ducks up on some of these high rocky ridges. We had one very, very hot day, and it was by a lake that you can see out here. It was really, really excellent birding. You can see the water out here. But these vehicles that we had, you can see the kind of the rolls on the side. Well, those are just little tarps that you could roll out and set up. So we had a good opportunity to to get out of the sun in days like that. Although I think that was the only day we really used them. Let's see. Yeah, here's a few of the birds that we saw in this lake setting here. Kenty's plover. We had several different kinds of plovers. I think we had maybe 4 different species of shrikes. This one is a young great gray shrike. We had a family group of them. A swan goose here. And this is a really goose that I'm going to talk about a little bit later, a bar-headed goose is a bird that I really kind of wanted to see because it has some really interesting physiological adaptations for migration that I'm going to talk about here in a little bit. This is just kind of looking over that lake area at night, and that was a fine look that night. But later on that night, this is the next morning, later on that night we had a storm roll in with 40 to 50 plus mile an hour winds. And so our grounds crew was out there staking down the tents as they got partially blown up and blown away, and they actually moved the vehicles over to block the wind a little bit from that. You can see if you look in the distance here, that's the outhouse, and actually that's kind of what the outhouse really looked like that morning. And so the real outhouse for that morning was over the hill. Some of the birds around the lake, upland buzzard, kind of like our red-tailed hawk, probably our most common boodio type bird there. And we saw quite a few marsh harriers, western marsh harriers, different from ours. This particular gull species is probably the 3rd rarest gull in the world, and I don't have any population figures on it, but we were pretty happy to see it because that's a target bird for a lot of people who go to Mongolia. And then a hooper swan, and they're pretty common over most of northern Europe and Asia. We get them occasionally we've had them a few times in Montana also. Essentially the same as a trumpeter, except for that big yellow base to the bill there. I haven't really mentioned this aspect, but Toyota Prius is the vehicle of choice there, and it's really unbelievable where they take these things. I mean, I don't know if they put bigger tires on them or what, but I think 75% when I say 75%, they're probably an underestimate of the Toyota Priuses. And at one point I was asking people about that, or asking some of the natives about that, and they said they thought that at least some of these, that Japan sends their used Priuses over to Mongolia for for resale, I guess. And I mean, they go through rocky areas, they ford streams with them, just really something. And in this particular instance, I mean, we didn't pass very many people. It probably weren't more than half a dozen times we really passed anybody on these back roads at all. And this particular group just wanted to stop and talk, and so that was just fine. This thing isn't going right. Okay. Not sure what's going on there. Okay, I guess we did have a little bit of a break in the tents, and we went when we had a kind of a primitive cabin to stay in. I can't remember 1 or 2 nights here. But another kind of a lake situation, a big flat land out there with all kinds of birds. And one of the neater birds there, one that I just fell in love with, were these demoiselle cranes. We saw 3 different species of cranes. This was, to me, the top one for sure. The other ones we had were the common crane, and we had one called a white-necked crane. But these were pretty neat birds, and I was wanted to get some good pictures, and finally did. I'm having a little trouble with this mouse here. Okay, here we go again. Again, some of the birds in this particular area. What was interesting, around the cabins up there, they had planted various different kinds of trees. And for you heavy birders here, we have what are called fallouts every now and then, where you get a whole bunch of birds because of weather pattern or something will just drop out and they're on migration yet, but they just fall out and stay in an area for a time. Well, we happen to have in the very limited amount of vegetation here a really good fallout, particularly of these warblers, these old world warblers, and some of which are pretty difficult to tell apart. So it was kind of a neat little deal in a place like that. But you know, when you think of it, when you have a small little area like we were in there, that would be, my goodness, they could see that for many miles away. And if they're going up to maybe breed up in the tundra or up north in the pine forest, that would be a good target for them. Okay, this bar-headed goose up here, it's of course a migrant bird. And this is a bird, this is the highest elevation migrant bird in the world. These things, they have been found at 29,000 feet up right around Mount Everest.
Jeez.
And they have some sort of physiological adaptations. I'm not sure if anybody totally understands it. They thought maybe higher red blood cell concentrations and maybe some other physiological things that they undergo to migrate that high. But again, you know, that's there's not a lot of oxygen up there, and so pretty neat bird. Great cormorants. Some lakes we had many hundreds, maybe thousands of those. This particular gull, brown-headed gull, Steve, the wings guide I was talking about, who's such a fantastic birder. This is the last gull that he needed to have seen every gull species in the world. And this was, I think there's like 52 gull species in the world. He was pretty happy. So, and actually that was the only pair we saw. And I think they might have been nesting there. We weren't sure. I don't know if he went down there and looked for a nest or not. But darn, I spoiled that one, didn't I? Okay, the Eurasian kestrel, you know, very similar. Not as pretty as our kestrel, but it's a kestrel, a little falcon. One of the warblers again. This one has a little bit more color, some wing bars, and a little more color in the head. Nice little bird. And then one night, Melissa and I had a really kind of a memorable evening, and everybody else stayed up in the cabins and eating or whatever they were doing, and we went down and walked down on some of the flats out there, and there was a pair of these demoiselle cranes down there, and they were fairly, you know, it was hard usually to get very close to them, but these we kind of just walked very, very closely and kind of walked at angles so we didn't spook them, and got fairly close to them where we could get some pretty good pictures of them. And then when the sun, you know, then the sun was coming and going, and putting some more light on them, and it was just, that's got to be one of my favorite pictures. Look at that red eye on that thing. Yeah, it's just a gorgeous bird. Yeah. Okay, just a little more culture here. There's not a lot of restroom stops out here. There are no restroom stops with what you would call a restroom. And so normally the restroom is a place that has a little hill that you can walk over. And the drivers or whoever were nice enough to have packed along this little facility for the ladies here and put that out, and I didn't hear any complaints. Worked pretty well. And then just to give you an idea, a little bit more, which road do you take here, and how do you decide which road you want there? And you know, and I guess maybe I don't know if I went by one slide, but I have a slide. They have a kind of a GPS app that apparently is just for Mongolia. And it apparently shows, from what they were telling us, it shows these two-track roads on that GPS map. And so for the most part, they knew where they were going. Every now and then, of course, they had to stop and talk to a sheep herder or somebody to really find out if that was the right way or not. But, anyway. Okay, and of course, down in some of those places, we had to ford quite a few streams. We knew this one was okay because that little Prius made it through before us. Yeah. Some of the herders, just to throw some little more in, we had some of the traditional horse riders here and the alternatives nowadays. So, and these are mostly, I think these are sheep and maybe goats mixed in some of these big herds. And those were the major livestock. We didn't see any cattle that I remember. We saw yaks, things like that. Horses, camels, I don't know what else, Melissa, just maybe that was it. Okay, elevation-wise, actually the capital of Ulaanbaatar is close to the same elevation as Helena here. Well, I guess we're doing okay. We're running a little late, I'm sorry here, but anyway, I get to talking. But anyway, this lake's about 8,700 feet, really beautiful lake. The sign you're seeing there, that is the only sign we saw out in these backcountry areas anywhere. No signs. And you'll notice that sign does not have any bullet holes in it. So, but again, camp area, that was pretty nice. Some of the birds up there, gray-lag geese, you may have heard that. The barnyard geese that you see in this country are basically, I think, domesticated gray-lag geese, or at least some of them are. So we saw those, black stork, Pallas bunting along the shoreline. Good. These birds are pretty cooperative. Some of them, steppe eagle again, and upland buzzard. Mongolian gull. There's about these used to be all called herring gulls. At one point, all the gulls like this were called herring gulls, and about half a dozen years ago, they figured out that really these were 4 different species, and one of the species was separated out and is primarily in Mongolia. Our herring gull is now called an American herring gull, and there's a European one, and then there's another one that's up in the Aleutians, I think. Some other neat birds. This bird actually nests up in parts of Alaska. Very gorgeous bird. Rosy finches, that's a nice bird there. We saw quite a few of those citrine wagtails. Rufous-tailed rock thrush were pretty common in the canyon areas. Northern wheat ear also breeds up in Alaska. Some of those that breed in Alaska cross over Asia and winter down south of the Sahara Desert in Africa. So, come on. Okay. Here, one of my other top birds was this Altai snowcock. And again, Steve Howell out early, and I'm out early there with him usually too, and he spotted one, or a couple of them actually, way up, somewhere up in here. I guess it was right up in there. And I actually got a picture of that from standing right here with him, and that's the bird there. So it's a really crummy picture, but that's a bird I really wanted to see. And again, it's a large grouse, larger than our dusky grouse, probably maybe the size of a larger sage grouse. There's another one that has been introduced into Nevada called a Himalayan snowcock that I have never really gone down to chase, but anyway. Okay, I'm going to try to speed up a little bit here. Okay, white-tailed eagle, you can see he's not fully adult yet. Sacred falcon. This gives you a little bit of an idea. These are all 40-mile-an-hour two-track roads.
Wow.
Yeah, you probably can't hear this. I guess there's no sound that'll hear, but anyway, there were some, we let out with a few chuckles.
Oh, my.
So, and then, some of these things looked like they were a little deep, but, Steve Howell never wore anything but sandals. And so when you come to a place like this, he was very glad to just go out and check out the depth, and, this one worked okay. Oops.
There you go.
Come on. Well, I wish, is there a key that I can push on this thing? No, I'm gonna go forward. That should start this driving. Anyway, oh, there we go, okay.
Wow.
Little. Okay, that's it. That's the last one. This is okay. Okay, we're getting toward the end here. Sorry this is running so long. But anyway, just a couple other quickies. Another lake we stopped at here, getting toward the end. This nice little budding posed nicely for us. Melissa posed nicely for us. This Steininger scoter here is an interesting one. That is a bird, we have the equivalent of that here as our white-winged scoter that we see almost every winter here in the Helena Valley. That was separated from this one, is now the Steiningers is considered a separate species. But about 5 or 6 years ago out here on the regulating reservoir, and I can't remember who it was, but somebody found one of these things, and we went out and took some pictures of it, of the Steininger scoter out here. That is the only Steininger scoter that has ever been seen basically in the inland in the United States or North America.
Wow.
Yep, they have been seen up in Alaska, one of them seen down on the coast of California, but the one that we have right here in Helena, Montana, is the only one. And if you look at Birds of the World on Cornell's eBird site, you'll see a Steininger scoter. There are pictures that several people, including me, took that are right in Birds of the World to identify that. That's pretty neat stuff.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's a typical, I won't meet the best dressed. This is the only town of any size that we ran into the whole time we were out there. And we had picked a lunch, and that's my burger right there. I couldn't finish all of that. Black kite was the most abundant of the raptor type species that we saw probably in some of the towns for some reason or other. It might have been because of some garbage or trash dumps or something, but we'd see bunches of maybe 15 or 20 of them circling around towns. But anyway, we'd also see that out and about, so one of the most common ones. They're pretty common all over Europe and Asia, I think. So some other good waterfowl species. This species has been seen in Montana a couple times. This is a really neat one that's never been seen in Montana or anywhere near here. Just one quickie on this. This is a bird that even the guides were very, very excited about because it's extremely, there's only something like, they estimate something like 150 to 500 of these remaining in the world. So it's, very, very endangered, and we were very lucky enough to see one. I got a picture of it, but it's from a distance and at a bad angle, so I thought I would steal one from eBird here.
Yeah.
Okay, couple more. Dowitzer, of course, we get Dowitzers through here. If you look at this one, this Asiatic Dowitzer. Our Dowitzers have a pretty long bill. We have both short-billed and long-billed Dowitzers. This one probably has a bill that's at least an inch longer than ours, and pretty red, pretty neat bird. We had a number of different terns. Whisker tern here, neat bird. White-winged tern. And eastern marsh harrier, and that's a male probably. So we had western and eastern marsh harriers there. That bearded reedling, kind of, you can see why they named it a beard with that, it's maybe, look more like a mustache drooping down there. A couple other neat birds, another saber falcon there. I put this bird in because it's very similar to our Virginia rail, Oriental reed warbler, another kind of warbler. Okay, heading back home here, some of the nice scenery, getting back into trees, which was really nice. Okay, this is, again, I had seen, this is called an Eurasian hobby, and I had seen one of these out on the, I think it was out on the outer Aleutian Islands once, but I got a terrible picture of it, and I really wanted to see one here. And so I was out with Steve Howell one day, and we could see these birds from a long way away, and we watched them. We probably watched them for 15 or 20 minutes, and finally they kept coming closer and closer and closer to us, and finally was able to get a couple of shots of it, and just a beautiful little falcon, just gorgeous. And actually this bird was kind of a little kestrel was flying around with it there. Okay, back into Ulaanbaatar, lots of traffic. Takes hours to get through some of those places. On the way home, of course, we're still flying east. So we stopped in Seoul, flew into Incheon and stopped in Seoul for hopefully for a little bit of birding, but that didn't work out. So I just got about 6 different species there, and
Oh, I can't get that.
all right, sorry that took so long. That's it.
That's great. No chance.
Okay, questions if anybody has any? Nope.
How many birds did you see that, were you expecting to see, like, you said 50 or something?
No, we had about right at 200 species, and so for the kind of length that this trip was, this is not a location to go to find a lot of birds. And of course, it's not in the tropics, so you don't get the color either. Normally on a trip of this length, we'll see 400 to 500 species. I personally saw about 70 new life birds, I think, on this trip. But again, I wasn't going just for the birds. I was going just to see that country, that new kind of a vision that I hadn't had the chance to see before. So, yeah.
Do they have wet, dry seasons?
They do, and I can't tell you when they are. I think they're similar to ours. They don't get much snow, but of course they have a lot of cold. But again, I'm not sure what they have in Ulaanbaatar for moisture, but I don't think there's, other than some of the higher mountains, they're probably no more than I'm guessing 12 or 15 inches a year. So yeah. Okay.
Would you say that was the optimum time for birding there?
Yes. Some of the birding trips go in August, and I guess that's probably pretty good too. The thing about fall, when you're going in late summer or fall, is that the migration for migrant birds is spread out a little bit more, and so that's probably pretty good in like say maybe most of August into early September. Because of the weather there, the cold, I wouldn't want to stay much later than early September, I think. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I mean, they do horse riding, the other stuff I mentioned, there's all kinds of activities there. Place has been found. There were a lot of people there, bike riders, horse riders, yeah. So, yep. Yep.
Could you tell with their grazing rotation, was any of it overgrazed, and did they have any weed problems?
That's a really good question, and part of the problem was we were there before we really had much growth. I mean, you didn't see a whole lot of really high grass there. But I think, again, it was late May and early June in those moisture areas. And I think we were just really early to see if, maybe there was a problem with overgrazing. But, certainly the way they were doing it, pushing the animals to different areas each year is the best way to do it, the health of the grass.
What about weeds?
Good question. I don't remember seeing a lot of weeds. And if they don't have plowed agriculture, which probably kind of contributes to it, I mean, you're disturbing that and providing, better growing conditions for some of the stuff. But I don't remember seeing them much in the way of what I thought was weeds. Part of that's because I wouldn't recognize them. The other thing is a lot of what I did see was very, very similar vegetation to what we have here in Montana. A Carragena species, a gentleman here was talking about earlier, crested wheatgrass, and of course ours is introduced, but it's an agropyron, and those kinds of things are very similar to what we have here. Birch trees, large trees, of course, we have west of the divide, we don't have here. Yeah, very similar. Yep. Neat place.
Next trip is where?
Next trip.
The next trip is the Dominican Republic in January.
Yeah, Dominican Republic in January. It's a shorty. And then, I keep saying I'm not going to do any more of these, but
There it comes.
I am Melissa and I are on a wait list for this. Steve Howell really kind of impressed me with his knowledge of seabirds in particular. And he has a couple of trips planned, but they're out of ways, and even though they're January of 28, but one of them starts in Buenos Aires, and they stop and they do some terrestrial birding too. Then it starts in Buenos Aires, goes around the Horn up to Santiago, Chile, and then that's the first segment. Then the next segment goes from Santiago up to LA, and you stop 2 or 3 days on some of these land places, to do terrestrial. So you got really great seabirds, and then you got we'll see.
Thank you to Bob and Melissa. Make sure you hit the cookies. I don't want to see any leftovers. And also, would you please help put the chairs away? Thank you.